It's so peaceful now, this wheat field in the Italian countryside in the Apulia region between Naples and Bari. It appears flat and level, plowed hundreds of times by farmers over the centuries. Just 3 miles northeast of the town of Venosa, it holds few reminders of a different time when this was once an airfield. A single lonely remnant is a rusted Quonset hut. In the distance looms a jagged peak mountain. The name of the mountain in English is Mount Vulture, but for a brief period of time more than 65 years ago, the temporary occupiers of this land called her Old Sawtooth. In 1944, this land was the temporary home of the men of the 45th Bomb Group of the 15th Air Force. Their airfield stretched for more than a mile. The runway and parking areas made from Marsden matting or pure steel planking, strips of interlocking steel that formed a metal carpet. Thousands of rocks form the base beneath the PSP, and these rocks still dot the surface of the landscape. This land was conquered many times during the past 2 millenniums and has seen the chariots of the Romans as well as invasions by barbarians, Saracens, Byzantines, Normans, Spaniards, and Bourbons. More recently, Italian fascists controlled the land, accompanied by their allies from Nazi Germany. British soldiers had recently driven the German army from this land, the Italian army having capitulated the previous summer. The mountain watched in silence as she had in the past, as more than 2,000 young Americans occupied the land, building a small city in the countryside, bringing with them their implements of war, their B-24 bombers. Their sole purpose was to wage war against Nazi Germany. The sounds of the aircraft engines reverberated through the nearby villages as the planes circled the region, gathering other aircraft in their group and organizing their formation before heading out over the Adriatic Sea to join other bomb groups. There were 21 heavy bomb groups in southern Italy. All shared the same purpose. Several hours later, the group returned, often fewer in number, some with battle damage and wounded aboard. All were happy to be home. One could see the relief on the men's faces when they returned from a combat mission. They were just happy to be alive. They were offered a shot of whiskey from the flight surgeon to calm their nerves, and most took it. There was a debriefing, perhaps a donut and coffee, and after this the men headed back to their tents to relax. The perils for the airmen came not just from enemy aircraft and their anti-aircraft guns. There were other dangers in abundance, and wheat fields for many miles around became emergency landing fields or were littered with debris from crashed planes. Some of the accidents resulted from battle damage, others crashed due to faulty equipment, mid-air collisions, or bad weather. The result was the same regardless of the cause. Many of the men walked away or parachuted safely, others weren't so fortunate. A total of 470 men were lost from this bomb group during the war. This includes 154 mostly non-flying personnel from the 831st Bomb Squadron who lost their lives when their ship was attacked by German aircraft in the Mediterranean Sea. The war was not safe for anyone. There's another grassy field, about a mile from the airfield, that shows no visible evidence of its former use. This is where the men lived, separated into 4 distinct squadron areas. There was also a chapel here and a few other outbuildings. Most are gone now. A few outbuildings are all that remain. During the war, the flying personnel who were fortunate enough to survive the required number of missions returned home to the U.S. Most of these men lived in tents. The non-flying personnel stayed longer. Most remained at the base until the war ended. Consequently, these men had more time to develop and improve their living quarters. Many built small, more permanent huts out of tufa block, a local stone. Along with the chapel, the mess halls and a few other buildings, such as squadron headquarters buildings, were constructed from tufa block, most often using local Italian labor. The Americans certainly made the best of the circumstances, however temporary they were. The group headquarters building was a farmhouse, leased from an Italian farmer. It was situated beyond the last rows of tents. The headquarters building also housed the PX. Today it sits locked and abandoned, caught up in a family civil lawsuit. By court order, no one is allowed to enter the building. If one were to venture inside, one would find a cat guarding 2 500-pound bomb fins at the top of the stairwell. A quick check in one of the rooms reveals the presence of a wall map of Europe, left by the Americans at the end of the war. Venturing behind the building, one finds unfriendly geese standing guard. It is clear that no humans have lived here for many years. Across a dirt path stands an outbuilding. In its former glory, it was the living quarters for the group commander and key staff members, and was known affectionately as Eagle's Nest. Today, sheep and other farm animals share the colonel's quarters. One window is covered by a piece of pierced steel planking, a reminder of its past history. The rear courtyard area of this building was once the site of volleyball games and friendly conversation. It now lies cluttered with debris and abandoned. It wasn't all work and no play for the GIs. Occasionally, when not assigned to other duties, they would find a way to get into Venosa. In the town, there were a couple bars set up for the airmen, informally known as Sloppy Joe's and the Carolina Moon. Both were across the street from the castle. The men could also walk through town and do a little sightseeing. Others preferred to venture out into the countryside. When the men went to town, they didn't find a beautiful, quaint town. There were no motor vehicles, the few in town having been taken by the departing Germans, along with anything else of value. It was a village or town of abject poverty, with hungry, barefoot children, war widows dressed in black, and elderly men and women. The people didn't speak English, so communication was an ongoing problem. And the generous GIs often brought candy, especially chocolate, to the delight of the local children. Some of the children picked up laundry at the base and took it to town for the women to wash, returning it later and earning a little bit of money or extra food for the family. There were no operating schools, so the children roamed the streets during the daytime or helped out with family businesses. Some of the GIs brought their cameras with them. Their favorite subjects were the children and the local townspeople going about their business. Venosa, with its countryside and nearby villages, poor as they were, provided a distraction from the routine, a distraction from war itself. Aside from obvious landmarks, Venosa wouldn't be recognizable to many of the former airmen. The GIs knew little about the local history when they were there. They weren't in Italy for tourism. Most didn't know a building they passed at the town's entrance was actually an ancient church, the Old Trinity Church. They didn't know it contained the remains of a Norman king, built on the base of a Roman temple was constructed prior to the 10th century. They didn't know that a more modern church stood behind it, started by the Normans but was never finished. The town has a newer, more colorful look. The train station is still there, as are many of the other buildings from an earlier era. The primary landmark for the town is the castle, which dates back to 1470. It was built by the Spaniards when they ruled this land. During the war it was in disrepair, but much of it has been restored, and today it houses a museum of archaeological history. Gone are the fascist slogans once painted on the towers during the war. Even the former brothel, a relic of the wartime years, has been transformed into a wonderful restaurant. It's situated behind the castle. In the old town center, just across the moat from the castle, stands St. Andrew's Cathedral. Construction of this cathedral was begun in 1492, the same year that Christopher Columbus discovered America. It was and remains a popular meeting place and a place to take photos. During the war years, the only vehicles in the town square were military vehicles. Today it's different, and civilian vehicles are in abundance. Not many GIs knew that Horace, the ancient Roman poet, was from Venosa. A building purported to be his home still stands among many habited dwellings from the same era. A tourist walking down the streets will see a mix of cultures and of times, ranging from the Middle Ages to the ancient Roman times, where one might see a lion from the Middle Ages perched upon a Roman column. Even this architecture blends together, and many of the houses show a mix of Roman foundations with later walls and modern interiors. Walking the streets of Venosa can truly be a lesson in history, the old mixing with the new. Visitors today will find happy, healthy, well-fed children and a vibrant community. Just outside of town, on the road leading from the airfield to Venosa, are some Jewish catacombs dating from the 4th and 5th century, showing the importance of this culture in the history of Venosa. Venturing into the countryside, one finds olive orchards and vineyards dotting the landscape, with castles crowning some of the nearby hills in the region. If one looks closely, there are still some reminders of the American presence. One finds gates to orchards and vineyards made from the PSP that once formed the runways for the B-24 bombers. Coverings for doors and windows throughout Venosa and neighboring lands show this architectural trait. The planking was cheap and plentiful at the end of the war, and the locals made use of it. Other reminders are in the hearts of people like Tony Prieta. Tony recalls his friendship with the bomber crew and what they meant to him during a difficult period. Other reminders come in the form of family heirlooms made from surplus parachute nylon. In 2009, Pasquale Labuti and Renato Mancino co-authored a book about the 485th Bomb Group and its relationship to the people of Venosa. The book, translated into English, is The Gates of War. The book captured memories through photos of the time period. During a 2-week period that coincided with the book's release, there was an exhibition of these photos in Venosa, taken by the men of the 45th Bomb Group. Attendees recognized friends and family members in the photos. The Americans had captured the photographic history of this period when few locals had cameras. One of the most poignant tributes to the men of the 485th Bomb Group lies on the rugged slopes of Old Sawtooth herself. On April 15, 1945, an 830th Bomb Squadron crew crashed after takeoff into the side of the mountain, taking the lives of all 9 crewmen aboard. The remains of the men and most of the wreckage was recovered at the time, and the incident was lost in history. Interested locals recently researched this crash, locating an eyewitness. In the late summer of 2009, a team of researchers returned to the mountain in hopes of locating the site. With the help of the eyewitness, the site was found from wreckage at the scene, and a brief memorial ceremony was held on the mountain for the crew of Lieutenant Robert Larkin. A memorial marker was later placed at the scene, and a special memorial service was held at a local Catholic church. This is yet another clear example of the love and respect the people of this region have for the men of the 485th Bomb Group. With their arrival came the freedoms they enjoy today. The men may be gone, but the memories live on, and their sacrifice is certainly not forgotten. Old Sawtooth looks down in silence, but on her steep slope she carries the reminder of a group of Americans who risked everything to create a better world for all of us.